They said it was help.
They said it was mercy. They called it aid.
But after over $1 trillion poured into Africa, one question still echoes across the continent. If this is help, why has it made us poorer? Chapter 1. The Promise of Prosperity. When the European empires crumbled after World War II, a new world began to take shape. A world divided not by colonies, but by currencies, debts, and influence. Africa, newly freed, became the next arena in a different kind of war, the war for economic allegiance. In the 1960s, Western nations declared a noble mission to help Africa rise. Billions in loans and grants were sent from the United States, Britain, France, and later global institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. Politicians called it aid for development. Newspapers celebrated Africa's golden future. But behind the speeches and handshakes lay a very different truth. What was given was not freedom, it was dependency. Chapter 2, The Debt Trap, begins. At first, the money seemed like salvation. Roads, schools, and hospitals were built. Ambitious projects promised to lift millions from poverty. But the fine print told another story. The loans were tied to Western companies, Western consultants, and Western interests. For every dollar given, much of it quietly flowed back through contracts, imports, and interest. By the 1970s, as oil prices spiked and inflation swept the globe, Africa's debts multiplied. Nations that once borrowed millions now owed billions. And as debt grew, so did control. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, stepped in, not as a savior, but as a creditor. They offered new loans, but with conditions. Governments were told to cut spending, privatize industries, and open their markets to foreign investors. The result? Local businesses collapsed, hospitals ran out of supplies, and farmers could no longer compete with cheap imported goods subsidized by the very nations claiming to help them. Chapter 3. The Illusion of Charity. Through the 1980s and 1990s, foreign aid became an industry, a massive global machine. Thousands of NGOs and international agencies flooded Africa, each claiming to save it. But while their intentions may have varied, the result was the same. Africa's future was outsourced. Entire sectors, education, healthcare, agriculture, began depending not on African innovation, but on Western funding cycles. And aid money came with invisible strings attached. We'll build your roads, but you must use our companies. We'll fund your hospitals, but only if you follow our policies. We'll train your leaders, but they must think like us. By the year 2000, over $1 trillion in aid had been sent to Africa. Yet more than 40% of its population still lived in extreme poverty. It wasn't a coincidence, it was the system, working exactly as designed. Chapter 4. The New Colonization. Colonialism never truly ended. It simply changed its language. The flags came down, but the banks took their place. The generals left, but the economists arrived. And instead of armies, Africa was conquered by spreadsheets, interest rates, and trade agreements. Countries like Zambia, Ghana, and Nigeria found themselves trapped in an endless cycle: borrow, spend, owe, borrow again. Even when they repaid their debts, interest kept them chained. And when they defaulted, their natural resources, what did copper, oil, gold, sealed, were quietly signed away under structural adjustment programs. It was a new empire, invisible yet more powerful than any before it, the empire of debt. Chapter 5. The Price of Dependency. The tragedy of aid is not just economic, it's psychological. When you tell a nation that it cannot survive without your help, you take more than its money. You take its dignity. Generations of young Africans grew up seeing foreign agencies decide their future, which crops to grow, which schools to build, which industries to prioritize.
Innovation withered, corruption flourished.
Why build when you can beg? Why reform when aid will always come next year? And the greatest deception of all, yet the idea that poverty in Africa is a moral failure, not a systemic one. Chapter 6: The Shadow of China. Then a new player entered the stage. In the early 2000s, China began offering billions in loans and infrastructure deals. No moral lectures, no IMF paperwork, no conditions. African leaders called it a fresh start. Western analysts called it debt trap diplomacy. But in truth, both were playing the same game, just with different faces. For China, it was access to minerals, ports, and influence. For the West, it was about maintaining a century-old financial order. And for Africa, once again, it was about survival. Chapter 7: The cycle continues. Today, over half of Africa's nations are either in or near a debt crisis. The continent pays more in debt service each year than it spends on healthcare or education. Every time a country tries to escape the system, to default, to nationalize, to reform, it is punished. Currency collapses, investors flee, and the story begins again. The names change, from loans to grants, from aid to partnerships. But the pattern remains identical. As one African economist once said, foreign aid is not meant to end poverty. It's meant to manage it. Chapter 8: The Real Cost of Help. So what does $1 trillion buy? Not prosperity, not progress, but control. It buys influence over governments, access to natural resources, and a seat at the table of every African decision that truly matters. For every school built, a nation lost a generation of thinkers. For every bridge opened, another door to independence quietly closed. And while headlines speak of generosity, the balance sheets tell the truth. Africa still sends more money out in debt repayments than it ever receives in aid.
Chapter 9: The Awakening.
But the tide is turning. A new generation of African leaders, entrepreneurs, and economists is beginning to question the narrative. They are looking inward, to innovation, to local trade, to continental cooperation. The African Continental Free Trade Area, the rise of fintech, and the youth-driven digital economy are slowly rewriting the story. And they are doing so without waiting for permission. For the first time in decades, there is a whisper of something long forgotten. Self-reliance. History has always disguised power behind noble words.
Once it was civilization, then it became democracy.
Today, it is aid, but perhaps the greatest act of mercy is to stop pretending that dependency is compassion. Because true help does not chain you, it frees you, and freedom in the end cannot be given. It must be earned. Every empire falls. But some are built not on conquest, but on kindness that kills.